Hey guys, it's Chris, and welcome to the Toned and Toneful video podcast, episode number 32, my current diet and why I think it helps me. So in this week's episode, guys, we're going to be talking about my current diet. And while last week we were talking about the timing of our meals and why it's so important that we have 3 to 4 evenly spaced meals throughout the day, this particular episode is going to be going into why I particularly choose why I eat. There's a lot of reasons to this, and it's because I'm looking for optimum mental health, I'm looking for optimum skin health, I'm looking for optimum hair health, I'm looking for optimum levels for as many parts of my body as that I can get. That's basically what I'm trying to say. And one of the things that I noticed in the last couple of years is I tried several different diets over the last 7 years. And some of the opinions that I'm going to put forward today in today's episode are going to be things that might be a little bit maybe controversial, dare I say, or a little bit alarming to some. But remember that it's my body, and then this is my opinion of what I came to understand. So about 4 years ago, in 2019, was the beginning of me starting a vegetarian diet. And this was the first time that I had taken on a diet that was very strict, other than just calorie restriction. And calorie restriction is when we take what our needed maintenance calories are for the day and we just go under that. So if your daily allotment is 2,000 calories, and some people might be riding a bike every day and doing a lot of workouts, and theirs could be as high as 3,000 or 4,000. The point is whatever your maintenance calories are that maintains your health, your weight at the weight that you are. If you cut under that, that would be considered, a cut, or that would be considered calorie restriction. So other than just calorie restriction, I had never before taken on a specialized diet, whether it be something like vegetarianism, veganism, keto, carnivore, any of those types of diets that are much more along the spectrum of a specialized diet for, wanting to yield certain results for our body. Now, in 2019, I had switched over to a vegetarian diet in the hopes of cleaning up a lot of the health problems that I had developed from becoming someone who was a very heavy fast food eater and someone who is also very, very prone to binging. I have a binging issue in my eating, so a lot of the times when I'm eating, I eat a lot of something and I eat it to the point where I pretty much make myself sick. I don't know why this is, but it's definitely a hand-to-mouth thing, so I will eat a lot of something. And so with vegetarianism, I was hoping that one of the things that I would cure is I would be eating things that were healthier for me, and if I ate larger quantities, it wouldn't bother my body as much. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to be bringing up a few different things about how my vegetarian diet and then how I came to the current diet that I am today and why I like it so much and why I think that a lot of people can benefit from having a lower carb diet and why a lot of people can benefit from what I would call keto omnivore. Now, anyhow, starting off with my vegetarian state in 2019, I came into the game eating pretty much a lot of the things that a lot of vegetarian people eat. I was still having eggs at the time, so I was having eggs, and I was still having, spinach, celery, carrots, onions, garlic, leeks, chard, kale. I was having potatoes. I was having sweet potatoes. I was still enjoying butter, so I was still having some animal-based products, but I wasn't eating any actual animal meats. And I continued this diet for about 2 years and a half. And the last year of the diet, I was very, very close to being a pure vegan. Now, during this time period, I had just ended a relationship that I was in at the time. And so it was a very ample time to change up my diet. A lot of people tend to change their diet at times like this. So I was looking into having a diet that would be cleaner for me. And my goal was to lose weight at first, but also I was looking to enhance my health in a few different areas of my life. Number one, I felt that at the time my hair was starting to thin a little bit, and this was in my early 30s, so I was a little bit bothered with that. And I also was starting to feel some health effects coming from eating very poorly. Namely one of them being almost like a heart palpitation type feeling and having a very hard time with sleeping and embarrassingly enough, a light form of sleep apnea where I had developed the inability to breathe properly while sleeping. So sleep apnea is like when we stop breathing when we're asleep, where our breathing will kind of get choked up. So it'd be like moments where I would wake up almost panting for air in the middle of the night around 2 or 3 a.m. So this was not something I planned on, and this was not the way that I had wanted to go into my early 30s. This was something that I had hoped that my life would be much better at that point. So I started this vegetarian diet in about October of 2019. And when I first started off this diet, one of the things that I noticed was I first felt very bloated a lot of the times because of the fact that I was taking on so much more fiber than I was used to. And a lot of the times when people first start off on being a vegan or a vegetarian, they're going to notice that they kind of run into this situation where they have a lot more of a bloated feeling than they maybe had before because of the fact that they're taking in so many more carbs and they're taking in so much more fiber together at the same time. So this is kind of like a tough change at first. I was eating a pretty low fat diet at this time. So I was eating I was having butter and eggs, but I was having them to a very controlled amount, maybe like 2 eggs in a day. And I was having maybe like a tablespoon of butter, maybe 2. It wasn't a very heavy butter, usage. And if I could get away with using olive oil, or I could get away with using something like, sesame oil, or, things that were like more along the seed based, I was doing that. I was having things like peanut butter. I was having things like cashew butter, almond butter. So these were kind of where I was, and still even eating a pretty heavy amount of bread. So if we look at the diet that I was having at the time, it was heavy fiber and heavy carbs with, intermediate amounts of protein mixed in the best I could, and still learning how to create complete proteins. As you guys know, that a lot of plants on their own don't have the ability to create a complete protein. A lot of plants on their own need to be combined, like brown rice and beans together create, the amino acid profile that can actually complete a protein, and it can give you a much stronger sense of protein than just having beans by themselves, or just having peanuts by themselves. And so, I had like kind of a learning curve with that. And I was also using meats like Impossible and things like that. So I was using, plant-based meat substitutes at the time. A lot of them were mung bean. And so, I had started off this diet in late 2019, and I continued it very, very easily until about mid 2020. And during this time period, I did lose a lot of weight. But one of the interesting things is, while I lost weight, is I didn't feel as healthy as I thought I would. I was still having trouble with a few things as I, went through this diet. So between October to June 2020, I went from about 185 pounds, 190 pounds, all the way down to 142. So I had lost a lot of weight. And I had gotten a lot trimmer in that time period and I'll show some photos of my face here where you can kind of see the difference in how I looked. I actually had a belly and came all the way down to, this look where I was a lot more slim, like very slim, like shredded abs and trim. But what was interesting is I didn't feel strong at the time. Now, coming from the diet I had before, it might have not been the healthiest, but I've always been a person into lifting weights. So previously I'd had an easier time lifting weights than I did during my vegetarian diet. So during the first couple months of vegetarian, one of the things that I noticed was I had kind of like an interesting pain in my elbow that had started to develop in my right elbow for me. You guys is left on this side. And I started to develop some interesting pains in my neck. Now, what's really unique to me is I had felt that since I had started a vegetarian diet, that it would be a lot lower inflammation and that I would have felt a lot better. But one of the things that I noticed about the vegetarian diet, having a lot of potatoes, having a lot of onions and garlic and things like that, is the aptitude to still be addicted to carbs was very high. So I still allowed myself to get French fries when I went to restaurants. I still ate potato chips. I ate a lot of those little, like a lot of vegetarian snacks, because one of the things you'll notice when you're doing a vegetarian diet is it's very hard to be satiated. So you'll notice that you'll kind of find pleasure in a lot of little snacks. And I still allowed myself to eat processed things like candy. So that was one of the mistakes that I had made during that diet at first. So during this first time period, again, from October 2019 through about June 2020, I'm still eating potato chips, I'm still eating French fries, and I'm still having a lot of things that many would consider just junk food. And I was using things like Nutella and peanut butter together because I was trying to hold my weight because I was losing my weight so quickly. Also during this time period, about March 2020, I started riding a bike as my full-time transportation. I had gotten into a bad car accident, and I don't know what it was, but a part of me had always ridden bikes before, and it just seemed so romantic to me to get back into riding a bike during this, COVID time period. The car had gotten just totaled. So for me, I think a lot of what I wanted to go to is I wanted to be in a place where I could ride a bike and I could have a little bit better control of my health along with this diet that I was doing. So I felt very, very encouraged to start riding a bike. So I started riding a bike. I got a nice road bike, an SR. And I started using that bike as, my method of getting around, and I really enjoyed that bike. Long story short, in that time period, I was riding from Sunnyvale to San Jose, and Sunnyvale in my area to San Jose is about a 13-mile ride one direction. So both directions is about 30 miles a day. And one of the things that I noticed when I was on a vegetarian diet and during that time period was it was very, very, very hard for me to pick up my cardio. Now, I know this might sound interesting to a lot of people because I had lost a lot of weight, but I was still kind of having a hard time with nose breathing the whole way on my bike rides, even though I wasn't riding particularly super fast at the time. I was having a hard time with maintaining my ability to have this joint pain not bother me. Eventually my elbow bothered me so much I would brace it up, and at that time I was actually kind of holding back on guitar. I wasn't playing guitar as often. And this remained a problem for me for quite some time. It's kind of a surprise because a lot of people, again, would think, and this is what I thought at the time, why am I running into all these problems with body pain? And I was still actually having some of the sleep apnea type problems where I was having a hard time breathing a little bit at night, even though I had gone to a complete vegetarian diet and lost weight. All these things were perplexing me. So at the time, I was still drinking a lot of coffee. I was still, again, enjoying a lot of junk food. I was still eating Reese's peanut butter cups. I was still eating Snickers. I was still eating potato chips and things like that. And namely, as time went on, I started thinking, well, why don't I go vegan? So we're going to go past, June 2020 and go to August 2020. And by this point, I had decided, I want to go in and I want to start doing a vegan diet. So I started becoming much more strict. We took out the eggs and we took out the butter and we replaced those with, again, olive oil, coconut oil, sesame oil, and, canola oil. And I had gone over to pure cashew butters, and I was buying different little nut butters from the store, like Whole Foods and things like that. And by this point, I'm living in San Jose now, so my bike ride is only 13 miles round trip instead of being 13 miles each way. So instead of a 26-mile ride to 30-mile ride a day, we had gotten it down to just 13 miles per day total. What I noticed was interesting during this time was, during my vegan time, I started getting a lot of pains throughout my body. Now what had just developed in my elbow had started to turn into tingling in my hands when I rode my bike, like as if my hands were falling asleep. And I started having this feeling in my feet as well. And this became kind of alarming to me because I had been thinking, well, I'm doing vegan now. Why am I running into these little health issues now that are really bad? I'm eating more spinach. I'm eating more kale. I'm eating more greens. I'm having broccoli all the time. I'm having all these things that I think would help. Why am I running into this situation where I'm almost having diabetic symptoms for a person who is eating so healthy? And what I had noticed is during my vegan time, I was eating a lot of potatoes and I was eating a lot of kind of starch-based things. I wasn't eating really any junk food anymore. I think the only thing I was still having at that point was bread and Nutella. And it had gotten to a point where the tingling in my hands had gotten so bad that on a regular 6-mile ride, my hands were going numb on my way to work. And I was starting to notice that I was getting skinnier and skinnier, but I was losing a lot of the muscle tone that I had. So there's a period where I wanted to do a lot of fitness, I had a lot of fitness goals, whether it be do a bodybuilding show or whether it be, just try to get into bodybuilder type shape, and create a silhouette and profile for my body that just made me happy. It was just something I was working towards, and whatever makes you guys happy makes me happy for y'all. But that's what I was just aiming for at the time. And I started to notice as I wrote down all the foods I was having and writing down the carbs, that the amount of carbs I was having per day was something that was quite alarming. And this amount of carbs and this amount of food that I was having a very, very profound effect on me and having a very, very profound effect on my body. And it was causing numbness in my hands and feet. And one of the things that really alarmed me one day and really kind of tipped me into a different direction, where really got me researching stuff, was I was listening to John Mayer, and I was listening, I believe, to the Heavier Things album. And it was an album I hadn't listened to in a long time, and a song had come on, and I was like, oh yeah, what's this song called? And if you guys have YouTube and you have YouTube set to the dark theme, like where it's like, black and then the lettering is white, I'm sitting there and I'm looking over at the screen, but I can't read it. And I've always had very good vision my whole life. I've never worn glasses and I don't use contacts. So it really tripped me out because I'm thinking, when did my vision get so blurry? Like, this seems sudden, like over like a sudden enough time that it was concerning. But then I started riding my bike more often and looking at the signs for the street signs so I could look at the names of the streets. And I started noticing I couldn't read those either. And this really alarmed me because if any of you guys know what type 2 diabetic symptoms look like, numbness in the hands and the feet, the high amount of carbs with fiber, and I thought the fiber was clearing that up, but I was starting to realize that the high amount of carbs that I was having, the Nutella that had the sugar in it, the bread, which bread might as well be sugar, it really alarmed me to the point where I realized that I have a problem. So I went in and got some markers done. I got some blood sugar things done, and my resting blood sugar was that of someone who was pre-diabetic. It was something to be concerned about. It was something to be legitimately worried about. And coming from where I was coming from, all I could think is like, all I've been trying to do is take care of myself and eat well. What is going on here? The first thing that I did was I had decided that because my body composition wasn't the way I wanted and I was experiencing all these symptoms, that it would be a really good idea to make a better macronutrient profile. Instead of it being high fiber and high carbs and having very low fat. And by the end of my vegan level, there's barely any protein, and all the proteins I had were very estrogen based. When we're eating a lot of tofu and we're having things like that very commonly, the nature of it to raise your estrogen is very high. And estrogen in very high levels also weakens the artery walls in very high levels. So this was something that was kind of making me a little bit worried because I was noticing more varicose veining showing up in my legs, which I had never had before. So I started having like little spider veins showing up in like certain parts of my calves and certain parts of my foot. And I just had made a decision, you know what, I'm going to change it up. And the change that I made led me to the current diet that I'm on now. And I haven't been happier on a diet so far. I've been the lowest stress that I've had, and I've been the lowest mental problems. You know, I would have to say that when I was vegetarian, I probably cried the most times that I ever cried. Like emotionally, you know, whatever was going on in my life was just crying. Everything set me off. Like listening to a Whitney Houston song would have me crying. Like I'm dead serious. And so one of the things that I came to realize was that like there must be some hormonal imbalance. There were a lot of little different things going on where in my chest development, it felt that the area around the nipples was starting to look very watery. I wasn't happy with the look that I was starting to attain through this vegetarian vegan diet. It was very odd. I felt very heavy on estrogen. I felt very weak in my lifts. And so I had finally made a decision in about July to October. I can't nail down the date here, but I believe it was sometime around my sister's birthday, and her birthday's in August. I had decided that I was going to bring meat back into my diet. And so what I did for about 2 weeks before, so yeah, it was about July-ish, because I remember it being a little bit after 4th of July. I started having like meat broths. Like I started having things that had, you know, meat bone broth or like a soup, but just having none of the meat with it. Like I would literally just have like chicken noodle soup, but not eat any of the chicken, just have like the chicken noodle soup itself, the broth and everything. And building up my immunity and my enzymes back to meat again. And if I could tell you that I noticed a difference almost instantaneously, I don't want to lie. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be overdone, but I noticed a change in my physique and I noticed a change in my body type almost immediately. One of the things that I noticed was as I started having a little more protein in my diet and I had gotten to starting incorporating meat at the very early levels, I started noticing that my hands were not going numb anymore. But I also had made a conscious effort to restrict carbs to a decent level. It wasn't like I had no carbs, but it's like if I had a meal, I could only have like one piece of bread or I could only have like one carb item, and it was very controlled. Like whether it was, oh cool, I'm going to have some spaghetti, but it's going to be like a literal weighed out on a scale 3-ounce serving, you know, maybe like 75 grams. And I'd weigh that out and I'd be very specific about that. And as I started tailoring back the carbs and maintaining the vegetables and maintaining the meats at a higher level and still incorporating fats like, you know, like egg yolk and like butter and things that, you know, and also the fats that naturally existed in the meats that I was cooking, I started noticing that I was feeling better and better. The numbness in the hands and the feet started slowly digressing to the point when I was riding my bike, I was like, wow, I'm able to ride at full performance the whole time. Another thing that I started to notice that kind of came back quickly was my ability to read things from far away started to come back much better again. And my vision restored over time. But in that beginning phase, I was like, wow, I can actually see better again. I can actually read small little signs from far away. And as I continued down that road, the discoveries, they kind of tripped me out because as I ate meat, I was worried, am I having too much cholesterol or am I having too much protein? Or am I having... So this put me in a state of already feeling really weird because after having been a vegetarian for 2 years and a vegan for like the last like 8 months of that, you become very, very attuned to your moral standing behind the food. instead of thinking about what's healthy for me, you're kind of almost in the mindset of just like, what's good for the animals around me? Well, like I don't want a chicken to get killed, or I don't want a cow to get killed. So you would think you'd be very, very almost worried about that. But I noticed that my symptoms were going away, so I felt a very odd guilt. Like I'm like, why am I feeling better? But at the same time, is this what my body needs? Is this what I actually need? So I continued down this road further and further and further. And what diet that led me to, by the time we get to about May 2022, so 2021, about August time, I started eating meat. But throughout that winter, I was still eating a lot of carbs and a lot of meat together and things, in general. Like the carbs were becoming more and more limited, but I still had snacks. I still had little things. Again, this is before I gave up candy. So this is like definitely in that weird state. So during this time, I also drank a lot of coffee. So throughout this whole period from 2019 till now, we're talking about 6 to 7 cups a day. I was drinking a lot of coffee. And I felt that the coffee was keeping me awake through all these little slumps that I was experiencing. We'll go on to what those slumps are a little bit later. So as I continue into the next year of 2022, I noticed that my ability to feel good, like I felt like that high blood sugar feeling still hadn't really gone away. I was experiencing a lot of little dips. Every time I would eat, I would get super tired. I'd be super worn out, and I would need to lay down, and I would need to either take a nap or be really lazy to the point that I was almost sleepy. And at this time, I was also still using cannabis, so that could be part of that as well. So these are all things that like stem into that. About May 2022, I started reading more about this keto diet and how being ketogenic had helped some people with symptoms that they had been experiencing, like hand numbness, like sleep apnea. And another one that I suffered from was my hair not being super full, which now seems to have been solved over the last like 6 to 8 months. But it was a problem where I was looking for that symptom relief at the time. And what the keto diet is that varies from our normal diet is inside of our bodies, if we take away glucose for a long enough time, if we're not eating forms of carbohydrates or like table sugar, or not eating vegetables that are very high in carbs, things like potatoes, things like sweet potatoes, things like too much onion, or a lot of things that are starchy and grainy naturally, you actually get to a point where your body will start to make ketones. And ketones have the ability to digest the fat that's on our body as an energy, and also digest dietary fat. Things like if you eat higher fat like avocados, and you eat higher fat like butter, and you eat higher fat like, tallow, which is actually made of beef fat, and you eat things like lard, which is made from pig fat. Those kinds of things, your body can burn that as an energy source, and you're able to maintain a much more even blood sugar and a much more even feeling throughout the day, psychologically and physically. Now, what's interesting about the keto diet is it was made in the 1800s, the late 1800s, like in the 1880s, and it was developed originally as a relief from epileptic seizures. And one of the doctors at that time noticed that when people had cut back on starchy items like bread and carbohydrates and things like that, and sugars, that the tendency of the epileptic seizures went down by a lot in most patients. 80% in about, maybe 75 to 70 to 75% of patients. So the overall general direction is that a lower carbohydrate meal with lower blood sugar as a resting level just in the body for the person created better results for their epilepsy. So that's where the ketogenic diet has its history in. But for me, what interested me in the ketogenic diet was a lot of the symptom relief and a lot of the things that were associated with taking in higher fats and being able to burn more fat and being able to carry more muscle by having more protein throughout the day as a higher macronutrient. So that's what got me interested in that, because of the pre-diabetic symptoms. I was still experiencing that. Even with adding meat, I didn't realize that I wasn't going to be able to cure it that way just by itself. And the high amount of carbohydrates I was taking in already, because of just the nature of me eating so many of those foods for so long, it was very hard to give up. So the first time that I really went on keto was that May, and I was very, very serious about it. And when I finally got into a state of being ketogenic or ketotic, I became very awake feeling in my mind. I felt like a lot of the dynamic that I have now is actually from having a very even mindset. And I'm not saying that I'm not emotional, but my emotions are much more controlled. They're much more even. It's something that I feel that I can think something before I do a certain thing, rather than just like my body always going off. Because like when I'm mad, I instantly feel like my heart beats fast, and it's just like, what? Like, instead I'm like, why is this person doing that? Like, I have like this almost like this weird threshold that I have to go through before an emotion will actually like come up and become a problem. And so one of the things that I really, really wanted to work on when I had first gone to the keto diet was kind of develop my bodybuilding body a little bit more and develop it into a shape that I liked and develop it into something that I liked the way it looked. So among this time is when I finally started really hitting the way that I wanted to look. I started really having the solid muscle set, the lifting became better, and I was actually sleeping throughout the night. And because my energy had become so much more even, this is the first time I started noticing that I started breaking up my coffee a little bit. I started breaking coffee down into smaller and smaller parts, so then that way I could enjoy, the coffee when I did have it, and I wasn't always just making my body super high on cortisol. I continued on the keto diet from probably about May all the way down to probably about August. In August is when I started getting a little more serious. I was starting to notice that since my mood was improving so much. And this August that I'm talking about is actually after the accident where I started Toned and Toneful. So a lot of the process that you guys have seen from the keto diet, and now I do like kind of a modified carnivore diet, the where you see that where I'm at in that is definitely from, you guys have got to watch me go through this, where my physique has gotten better. I've healed quicker from things. This accident that I got in, like, they thought that it was going to take about a month and a half more of healing before I'd be out of the cast. I got out of the cast in a week. They didn't have to do any permanent pins in my hand. It ended up being a very, very good thing. This ended up lowering the inflammation in my body so much. My elbow no longer is a problem. I'm able to play guitar hours on end. And so the keto diet unlocked a lot of the inflammation that was living in my body by helping me get my blood sugar levels down, by helping me get my symptom relief under a point where I'm like, wow, instead of just being a symptom relief, I'm actually starting to heal. Like, I'm starting to know that I'm better than I was in 2019. I'm starting to feel even better than that. Feeling better than I did in 2016 physically. Feeling strong. Not feeling winded as easily. I was able to ride my bikes for pretty decently long periods of time and be able to make the bike riding count for me. By this point, I had gone on 50-mile and 100 Centurion level rides during some of these days. Like what we call century rides is 100 miles. And I was starting to get to a point where I noticed that the keto diet was healing me so much. And I was so happy with it because I was still able to have vegetables and have the meat that I was used to having. And having higher fats kept me satiated and from binging as badly. So that's what I really, really want to emphasize to you guys is that the meal timing before was so much harder to do because, like we explained in the previous episode, episode 31, the spikes that you have with insulin throughout the day when you're eating carbohydrates, it's like you're spiking and falling down, so you're peaking and valleying so quick. That was very hard for me to maintain my ability to be solid in my blood sugar level. And that instability in my blood sugar was leading me to a lot of problems. And with the keto diet, I was able to eat smaller meals that satisfied me more. And those meals lasted for longer amounts of time. Right now, I currently eat 3 meals a day with one small snack, and that small snack is usually a fat-based one. But around August last year, I started experimenting with getting past keto, like even and going on a little more extreme version and taking on a carnivore diet where for about 1 month every 3 months, I just go strictly meat. I don't even eat any plants at all almost. And one of the things you'll notice when you start taking on, a keto diet, which I believe is the best diet, a keto omnivore diet, I firmly believe is the best diet. I believe that diet provides you with plants. I believe that diet provides you with a small amount of carbs. Like, if you can do a little bit of, like, say, for example, like baby carrots, like have like 3 or 4 of those a day where you're not taking yourself out of keto. Keto is about keeping the carbs low enough that you're making ketones. Keto isn't just, like fasting, or it isn't just not eating carbs for like a day and then a day later you're eating carbs and a day later you're not. Like your body's not going to be able to stay in keto that way. The way your body stays in nutritional keto is by you keeping the carbs low always. It's a decision you need to make. And I think one of the big things with keto too is I had given up all candy. And I had to face one of my first real times, like quitting cannabis kind of sucked because like I felt like cannabis more than really so much about like me being addicted to it, because it wasn't like an addiction feeling. It was more like I felt like my personality was going away, like the personality I had developed. And so moving forward into my feeling like my personality was gone, I had also gone to the level that I was giving up candy. And when I gave up candy, that was like legitimately like one of the hardest things I ever did. Like where you literally wake up at night and you're angry because you're like, yo, I can't like have any candy. But the one good thing going for the keto diet is it mentally kept me so stable that I was able to be like, you know what? You don't even need this stuff, dude. Seriously, you need to like stop it with that. So I was able to calmly enjoy the foods that I was eating and make a conscious decision to stop eating trash. Like legitimately, like I needed to cut that stuff out. And as I continued and tried carnivore diet, the carnivore diet where it's all meat, it's a fun experimentation. And I think that that's something you do at your own desire. That's not something I sit there and recommend to people. What I like to recommend and what I like to see for people around me and what I like to show them is if they're eating whole foods, like things that come from nature. If you eat like vegetables and they're cooked, you have some cooked spinach and you have some cooked broccoli, cooked asparagus, things that are on the lower carb side and things that have higher fiber and then like high micronutrients. And the word oxalate means a lot, but I don't want to talk about it too much, but things that are lower in oxalates too. That was causing some of the tingling in my hands and feet as well. But the only reason I digress is because if I go down the oxalate route, we're having another whole hour added onto this. But it's something I will talk about because I really enjoy sharing information with you guys to the extent that we can grow our minds and grow our health through what we're learning. But one of the things that I noticed is that once I had done the carnivore diet and kind of cycled back into keto omnivore, where I was having avocados, butter, lettuce, romaine lettuce is really good, cooked spinach, a couple baby carrots a day, broccoli, and I was having, maybe a couple pieces of hard cheese, maybe only a few nuts. I was feeling really, really good. My skin looked healthier than ever. I was healing faster than ever. I was sleeping all hours of the night. And I think the most important thing, like, no matter what diet you do, if you're not getting good sleep and you're staying up all night every night and then you're waking up throughout the night constantly, that is something that needs to be addressed before you ever worry about any diet. No diet in the world will matter as much as you getting sleep, bar none. So always make sure that your sleep is coming your way. And so getting onto the keto omnivore diet for me, which means, keto, both forms of high fat and very, very low carb, under 20 grams a day. You couldn't even eat a slice of bread. If you ate a slice of bread, you kick yourself out of keto, pretty much right there. But if you take that diet and you really follow it down its lengths, you have something you can work with. And I think it helps a lot of musicians because it helps with focus a lot. And I think another one of the reasons that it helps is keto omnivore is affordable. If you can go get I don't know if it's the easiest to get, but if I go down to Whole Foods, my local Whole Foods that's across the street, the one that's on San Carlos, or the Alameda out here in San Jose, California. If I go over there and I go get an avocado, a medium avocado that's not organic right now is 99 cents, and Whole Foods is a really expensive store. Most things there are really expensive because it's like a health food, like specialty store. Most of you guys know what this is. But what I'm trying to explain is like avocados, the baby carrots, broccoli, asparagus, cauliflower. You can have a little garlic here and there, but you definitely want to stay away from onions for sure. You want to stay away from potatoes, no corn. Anything that's really sweet like that and full of carbs, you want to be careful with. And the reason that I say that is because it'll keep you ketotic. But you can have peanut butters, you can have nut butters if you want. I'd be careful with these kind of butters because they just tend to have a lot of sugar in them. You can have beef jerky, you can have cheese, you can have nuts. A really good nut for your body is definitely pecans and macadamia nuts. Those are both really good for the body, and they both help you not only have a decent amount of energy, but they also help you have enough amount of fat that when you eat a palm size, like you're literally eating enough nuts to cover your palm. It's not about like a handful. It's like what covers your palm. And if you eat that amount, I firmly believe for your body size, because that's about the size of your stomach, you're in a really good position. Because the ending part of being keto was I learned that having higher fat, medium protein, and having almost no carbs has given me the best balance of look, mental feel, and sustainability and health. Wherever I go, I'm probably one of the lowest body fat people in the room, and I don't sit around and try. I eat the diet that I need to eat, and because it's built in such a way that helps me maintain my health and my weight, it's so easy to do. It's like you can only build a passion for something that's good for you. And that's one of the things that I recognize about keto, and it really gave me a lot of passion to diet. Whereas like vegetarian, I had a passion for it, but it was definitely much more a moral standard, along with thinking, like having a perception. What's being sold to us is plant-based, everything is better for you. But there's a lot of reasons why having a heavier amount of fat is so good for your body. It's so good for your hormones. My muscle content picked up. My mood chilled out more. My voice got more towards a deeper spectrum than it was before previously in my life. My voice was much higher. And I think if you watch some old videos of me, you might be able to even hear that. But I'm just happy with the result of being as healthy as I am right now. And keto omnivore is where I'm at right now. And the ability to keep the fats higher and be more satiated between each meal has actually kept me from binging as often, which is a legitimate problem for me. So that's why I wanted to share this with you guys in this episode. Is I wanted to talk about why when we're going on to diets, and a lot of friends of mine are starting up like, oh, I'm going to do vegetarian. And I want them to try it because everybody's body reacts differently to everything. But I just wanted to share with you guys how great I feel doing keto omnivore and how great I felt doing carnivore as well. And I know it seems like contrary to popular belief, like, oh, you eat red meat, you're just going to get overweight and die. And everyone kind of explains it like that, but it ended up being one of my life-saving health effects, like right there. Like that changed my life in such a way that I became healthier and I became much, much more in tune with my body. And so I wanted to share that with you guys, and I hope that this makes sense. And I look forward to you guys, letting me know what you think of this stuff. I know sometimes these episodes are long, but they're for you guys. I set them up long so that you guys have the information that you need, and I'm not just rushing through stuff. So remember, guys, this is episode number 2 of the diet series, because the first one was when we eat. This one is like what we eat. And I think what I'm going to do next week is go over the macros and go over some thoughts and ideals of foods that we need specifically, maybe with some imagery, so we can get you guys really locked in on what you need to make your diet work for you guys. These were just more like the first one on meal timing was just kind of giving you an idea how the body works. This one right here is just giving you some philosophy and a little bit about some symptoms I dealt with from my different diets. But all of this together is going to give you a clearer picture on how to build something for yourself, because that's what matters to me, guys, is you guys being happy with what you need. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for hanging out for episode number 32. I really appreciate you guys. I really hope that your week is going well so far, and I hope that it continues to go well. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week. And remember, above all else, stay toned and toneful.